Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, Vin Diesel back from Cart by Vanguard deck profile. So if you guys enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, and subscribe. This time we're covering set 13, Astroea. So, Astroea for Dark Side is a pretty interesting deck because it has Unica, where a lot of us agree is mostly better than the Masques, who pretty much serves as a finisher. But hey, we're getting some good support with it that allows for better targeting with her skill with the restand and just bigger beat sticks. Because of course, when you have a multi-attack deck, what do you do with it? You give it beat stick. So let's go and get the start, shall we? And see what we got. Because this deck, honestly, slowly but surely is working better. I still love how after I changed the deck to not care about Baiko so much, that it immediately gets so much better and actually starts blasting out triggers consistently. First today we have our starter in El Majestar Pipus equals Mulchi. Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 6k base, auto road point for 1 second, draw a card, standard star, plus to free draw if you 1 second. All around pretty solid. None of the ride line really requires this, but I mean, it has a moon in it, so automatically if you don't run this as your starter, you're dead to me. But, you know, either way though, it's a free draw, and again, you can only run any starter you want, but yeah, moon bias kind of takes form. Then we have our Over Trigger and Terrifying Wicked Dragon King Vampires. Grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power. Over Trigger, Over Trigger in your deck. When revealed, Astro Trigger, move that card, draw a card, choose one of your mutes. It gets +1 for the turn. Even if you revealed it during your drive check, activate its additional effect, which you get during your turn. All your Vanguards are +10k and a critical until end of this fight. All around pretty solid. It's one of the few effects that actually target you as the player and not you as the Vanguard, but cool. Free 10k and a crit to your Vanguard throughout the entire game is pretty solid, especially in a deck that can give rear guards multi-attack. Granted, if it was Vanguard, multi-attack would be a lot better, but hey, free 10k and a crit is pretty solid, though of course, you know, it's better to pull it in the early game, but the deck doesn't really need to rely on this at all. But if you see it, your opponent's pretty much guaranteed to lose because you run 8 crits. But we'll get to that in a second when we see our normal triggers. First, though, we will look at our draw triggers. That was Browse Wild Master Riley. Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 4k base, continuous guard. So if your opponent's Vanguard's a grade 3 or Gary, so 5k shield. So she's a 10k shield, which is nice to have. She's a draw trigger, so she helps increase the hand. And that's nice because you want to try to draw as many crits as possible in the early game. Once you hit the past the early game, you pretty much want to just start, like, you know, seeing them in drive checks or whatever. But, you know, being able to help increase your hand is nice because it does add for guarding power, especially if you're dropping crits on in the early game. But also, you know, she's an extra 5k shield, so when late game comes around and every guard matters, yeah, she's pretty helpful for that. So 3 of Riley. I swear there's 4 of her because I sometimes will see her more often than I see my 8 crits. But, I mean, hey, it is what it is, so 3 of Riley. And speaking of which, we have our 8 crits. 4 Flinty Slasher, grade 0 boost, 15k power, 15k shield, 5k power. Run whatever crit you want in this position. I just run Flinty Slasher because she's the OG vanilla one, and she was the quickest one I could find when I built this deck. And then there's Stem Deviate, Dragon, grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k power, critical trigger, auto rear at the end, about a boost to put it to soul to choose one of your mutes, and 2k for the turn. Okay, I would recommend you run Stem Deviate in the deck as a floor of, not because of its like free 2k skill, because it goes to soul. Because this deck wants to get as many crits and souls as possible, and if you miss your crits because maybe you can't soul charge, or maybe you don't have enough resources to soul charge them back from drop zone with stuff like Turan, but you have access to them in hand, maybe you want to call them down if it's a Stem Deviate and then just send it to soul so you can proc off either of the Astreas more easily. So, you know, it's nice to run as a floor because even though its stats do nothing for it, being able to send itself to soul in itself is a free soul charge for this deck. So 8 crits, you know, for the pressure, and then the 3 draws to help draw them out, but also for guard power. Then we have our 4 heals and Caper Companion. Grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 5k power, standing heal, but that's free heal. You can run any heal you want, really. I personally don't like the effect heals because I feel like they're too situational, being 10k shields most of the time, only 25k shields in very specific situations. I'd rather much have the consistent 15k than the fluctuating 10 to 25. But you can run whatever heal you want, really. And if you're wondering why this is not Alexandria, just like I said, I think either the Grizio deck or the Jadrul deck, it was one of the Dark States decks. I just keep forgetting to change the heal because, I don't know, I just like Caper Companion at this point. I used to not like her, and then after one match with Jadrul, she pretty much shows up consistently in all of my decks. So yeah, 4 of Caper Companion, I can pretty much reliably sack her whenever I feel like or whenever I really need to, so cool there. Then move on to our grade 1s. First, we're on 2 copies of Twin Marble Dragon. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto rear guard once per turn. When you soul blast 3 or more cards at the same time for the cost of your Vanguard's ability, you get to look at the top card of your deck and put it to top or to soul, and if it gets plus 2k until the turn regardless of where you put it. So all around pretty solid. Being able to get a free soul charge is great, or also being able just to stack the top card of your deck if it's a critical or any trigger at all is also great, and he becomes a 10k booster just by proccing off that ability. All around pretty solid, and if you have 2 of them on the board, then you know their effects do go off at the same same time. The only downside is that if you send the first card back from its skill, most likely it is going to imply that it is a trigger, because then when you do the second one, you still keep it there. It definitely implies the trigger aspect, but I mean, all around, Twin Marvel is a very solid grade 1. Gets soul cards, gets deck stacks for triggers, and is a 10k booster or swinger, and he has a beautiful red moon in the background. What's not to love about it? Easy 2 of. Then we have 3 copies of Vileness Chimera, grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto rearguard once per turn. When this unit is chosen by the ability of your Vanguard, I'm just on its card name, soul charge 1, and this unit gets plus 5k power for the turn. All around, pretty solid, because, you know, if you choose it with Astrea's skill, or I don't know why I said Astroea, like they're 2 different cards, Unica skill, he'll get plus 5,000 off of Unica, then he'll get plus 5,000 off of his own skill, and get that free soul charge, which granted is mandatory, but still. And then if you pick it off of Baiko, implying that you have no better, you know, targets for the restand, at least he'll get an additional plus 5 when he restands on top of whatever Baiko gives him. So 3 of Chimera all around pretty solid, helps increase soul, and it can combo really well with Twin Marvel since you can do them at either of the same time, and he does at least replace one of the cards soul blasted for Astrea's cost, so easy 3 of. Then we have 3 copies of my personal favorite grade 1 in this deck, and one of my favorite cards in this deck in general, Irem Capricornus. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto rearguard. When this unit boosts, if you have Vanguard, I'm just on its card name, choose to 1 trigger unit from your hand or drop some, put it to soul. If you put it from your hand, draw a card. I can get why some people apparently don't like this, because it is a little slow, because it has to boost for that effect, so A, you can't call it to the front row and rush with it, but B, like, because it has to basically go off during the battle phase, that means there's less time for you to, like, perfectly fix it to where you can soul blast accordingly. But I really do love its skill, being able to send literally any trigger, not just specifically crits. Obviously, you get the most benefit out of crits, but being able to send any trigger to soul for a possible free draw if it was from hand is great, but also because it gets to refresh a bunch of triggers, that's even, or not refresh a bunch of triggers, but refresh the soul is even better, because once you soul blast out from a Just Star skill, you can, you know, just send triggers back, or just send crits back and fill up the soul. Either way, though, Irem's a pretty solid grade 1. I like him, so he's an easy 3 of. Then we have 4 copies of our PG and Repelled Malice Dragon. Grade 1 boost, 0 sources, K base, continuous sentinel. You have to 4 sentinels in deck, and also put on guard circle. Choose one mutes. It cannot be hit in the battle, and if your hand is true and more cards in it, choose a card from your hand and discard it. Standard PG, nothing too special about it. Basically means if this and only one of the cards in your hand, you place it on guard circle, you don't have to discard, which is great, because that means you can be as aggressive as you want in the early game, and then when your opponent counterattacks you, because, I don't know, maybe you called an entire board of grade 1s at some point, cough, cough, wink, wink. I've definitely never done that before. You know, you can throw down the PG before your opponent kills you, and you're all around pretty much safe. I love Repelled Malice Dragon. You can run with skill Hate Dragon because they have the exact same skill, but I prefer Repelled Malice Dragon because it came out closer to the time of Unica's release, so 4 of. And then we, of course, we have our one of Ride deck card, none in the main deck, sadly, of Almagestar Swart equals Sparta, but she is callable in this deck, so fair enough. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Okay, before we get on to the skill, she has a cool purple sword, and she has Moon in the background, so automatically she would be a 4 if this deck had space for it. Anyway, skill, auto and Rotopon by Almagestar Turret equals Dina. Soul charge 2, then if a crit was soul charge, you get a free draw. All around pretty solid. I have not pulled off that ability once since upgrading this deck from its original set, which I think was set 9 is when Unica came out. Actually, yeah, set 9, which sucks for me, but hey, it is a free soul charge too, so you have fodder for Unica Soul Blast skill and Baiko Soul Blast skill, but also it's a free draw if you hit the thing you want to hit, aka a crit into soul. And then act rearguard once per turn. If your opponent's vanguards are grade 3 or greater by binding 1 trigger for unit from your soul, she gets plus 10k power for the turn. I love that skill because while yes, this is a way to get extra crits into bind zone, it can bind any trigger. So if your soul is empty on crits because maybe you bricked, or maybe you just haven't been seeing all your crits, or maybe you did see all your crits and they're already all in bind zone, she can just bind any trigger and she'll be an 18k for the turn. I love that part of her. She is so versatile. She is so amazing. And especially in that one time before I basically took the deck's focus off of Baiko to where I wasn't soul charging crits at all, she was pretty much the only thing that was keeping me alive. So one of Sparta, very nice beat stick that's an 18k base, and you know, has a really solid on Rotopon skill that either gets you 2 free soul in draw or just gets you 2 free soul in general. So one of Sparta in the Riot deck, and Moon Bias holds supreme. Then move on to our grade 2s. First, we're on 4 copies of Phonograph Opera Star. Grade 2 5k shield, 10k base. Auto when this unit is placed on rearguard circle. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Almagestar on its card name, counterblast 1 to draw a card. Okay, not amazing because it does eat away at the CB, but I mean, if you have a free CB to spare, it's a nice little draw regardless of what your Vanguard is, as long as it's an Almagestar. So it works on Dina, it works on Baiko, it works on Unica, it works on the starter in Sparta. If by some miracle you call this thing out while you're on it. Actually, I'm not realizing that that's not the case because it requires grade 3 or greater. So ignore the last sentence I just said. But then other skills continues rearguard during your turn. It gets plus 5k power for every 2 critical triggers in the bind zone. So all around, pretty solid. You know, it's pretty much just proccing off Baiko's skill one at a time for herself, which is nice. You know, you can still be on Unica, and if you have two of these in the front row, it's like having Baiko just without the extra attack. But at the same time, we also can just get more numbers out of this in general if you combo with Baiko for restand into big numbers. All around, Opera Star is a very solid grade 2. Adds for numbers, adds for hand cards, even if it takes up a little bit of CB with it, and she's just all around pretty cool, so it's a nice solid 4 for me. Then we have 4 copies of Kit's Peak Griffon. Grade 2 instead 5k shield, 10k base, auto rear guard. When this unit is placed on the rear guard circle, if you have a Vanguard with Almagestor card name, choose any 2 trigger units from your drop zone, put them to soul. Again, I really love how this deck, when it soul charges triggers, or like it pretty much affects anything, it doesn't necessarily specify it has to be crits, which is great. So, you know, again, if you do break out of your crits, or maybe you've seen all of them and you already like you sent all of them to bind zone, you don't have to specifically send crits to get your effects off. You can still send any triggers to soul to get the effects off, and then continues to rear guard to guard. So if you have a critical trigger in your bind zone, he gets plus 5k power and 5k shield after all the player's turns. Okay, I love that. It just requires 1 crit. I don't know why when I first read this I thought it would require 2, but being able to require 1 crit is just great, because most of the time, even if you brick hard, you'll still at least see 1 crit. So being a 15k shield, 10k shield and a 15k base all around pretty solid. And not to mention that his ability, unlike this one, works with any of the Almagestar. So again, Dina, Unica, Baiko, and if by some miracle you got this out while you're either on Sparta or the starter, you can immediately call Kit's Peak Griffin to get 2 triggers back. All around, very solid. Free trigger recycling, free Unica technical Soul Blast fodder, and it's just a nice small little extra guard / beat stick if you need it. Not an amazing beat stick, because we do have a better beat stick in the form of Opera Star on the next card, but still solid card nonetheless 4 of. Oh, never mind. I forgot. Yeah, I was like, did I get rid of the beat stick? And I was like, yeah, I did for Phonograph. The beat stick I was referring to, though, when I was talking about Kit's Peak was Barracuda and Manticore, but then I remembered, right, I did get rid of Manticore for this thing, because this thing technically gets more numbers overall. Anyways, we move on to our last grade 2. One of in the ride deck, none in the main deck of Almagestar, Turan equals Dina. I know I'm not supposed to say the equals part. I just love saying that. It feels cool to me. Anyways, not Violet Moon, but like Pink Moon in the background. Anyways, grade 2 instead 5k shield, 10k base. All when she was wrote upon by Unica Astroea in its card name. So not just Unica, but if by some miracle you avoided the Baiko text that says it has to be placed on top of a Almagestar grade 3, then, or an Astroea grade 3, I don't remember what the exact wording is, but unless you bypass that somehow, it's pretty much only going to be Unica, or until they give us another Astroea grade 3, one of the two. Anyways, choose an Almagestar Sword equals Sparta from your soul, and call that card and this card to rear guard circle. Thankfully, it doesn't have to be to the same column, meaning you can call this to the front row, let's just say right, and then you can call Sparta to the back row center. All around pretty solid. That it's an easy free call rear guards, and then act rear guard circle once per turn. If you have Vanguard Almagestar in its card name, counterblast 1, choose 2 triggers from your drop zone, put them soul, and this unit gets 5k for the turn. All around pretty solid, because it's a simple CB1, which granted Opera Star and Baiko kind of eat into, but being able to send any triggers to Soul is great, because it's basically like Kit's Peak, except it also gets power on top of that. So all around, Dina's pretty good, and never let Dina live. Like the video that what's it called? The Astroea Masques vs Youthberg video, and the full blast one that went up, I think, 2 days ago. If this goes up on Saturday, no wait, this goes up on Sunday, so 3 days back. The video that went up 3 days ago, whatever that match was, when pretty much what ends up happening is my friend Oolong, Mandala, whatever he chooses to go by, bot decks Dina. So and that's because Dina eventually will become a problem, because it just gets us a bunch of free soul cards. So always hit Dina if you see it come down. So 1 of Dina in the right deck, very solid. You don't really need in the main deck, because she gets to call herself and Sparta, and therefore allows for much more numbers. So 1 of in the right deck. Then we move on to our grade 3s. First, we're on 2 copies of Almagest Sphere. Grade 3, normal order. It play this card if you have a Vanguard of Astroea in its card name. Countercharge 1, and then choose any 3 triggers from your drop zone and put them into your soul. And then if you have a card of Astroea and its card name was removed from this turn, choose one of your Vanguards and it gets +1 crit for the turn. All around pretty solid, because it's a free countercharge. This is one of the only cards I have ever seen that only requirement for getting like a free resource is just to have a Vanguard with a specific name. Like, the rest of this effect doesn't matter. You could have no CB, you could not even need the rest of this effect, and as long as you have an Astroea Vanguard, that's just a free countercharge. So cool. And then we can choose any 3 triggers from the drop zone to put them into soul. So crits, heals, draws, over, etc. Most of the time you're going to pick crits if you can. And then if you're Vanguard, and then if if you're removed in Australia this game, or this turn, basically you're on Baiko this turn, she gets an extra crit, which is great because Baiko's skill gives her a drive when you remove an Australia. So being able to add the extra crit and basically make it Unica again is pretty solid. So 2 of Amethyst Sphere. It does add a little bit more grade 3s to the deck, but it definitely helps with the CB problem that these two ensue, but then also gives the Vanguard crit if you have to be on Baiko, and at least nets you 3 free soul. So 2 of Sphere, very solid card, and pretty much fixes 2 problems in 1. Then we move on to our other normal order, and that is Mask of Hydro Gum. Grade 3 normal order. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Choose up to 1 Draco Tree or Mask in this card name from one of them. Reveal it, put it to hand, and shuffle your deck. So there are no Draco Trees in this deck because this deck, A, would have a CB problem if it did, and B, when I did run the card that made the Draco Tree markers and search this, Skull Kemda, not only did I rarely hit it, but it ate up all of my CB, and that was the version of the deck that didn't see crits. And lo and behold, the second I take him out, the deck does fine. The deck doesn't need the Draco Tree markers, it has enough B6 as it is. The only way you need those Draco Tree markers is A, to either flex, or B, if you're really struggling. But at that point, if you're really struggling, you're probably not going to win anyways. So, fair. And this other skill is Act Drop Zone. If you have a grade 3 Vanguard with Masques, without Masques in its card name, reveal a grade 3 with Masques in its card name from your hand, and ride the revealed card as cost for stand, and then if you road, put this card into your soul, and your opponent's Vanguards are grade 3 or greater, and you do not Persona Ride this turn, you activate Persona Ride. All around pretty solid. It gets you 1 more free soul card. You get to Persona Ride possibly, which is even better. And it's just all around pretty solid. And it's also Soul Blast fodder for your Unicas, because once it gets into Drop Zone, you can just use it again next turn, and it does it all for free. All around pretty solid. It searches out Baiko. It would search out Skull Kemda if we had Skull Kemda. It would search out Demon Sherider if we had Demon Sherider. But again, it also acts as free Persona Ride, and worst case scenario, it allows for multi-attack while your opponent's on grade 2. So 3 of Mask of Hydro Gum. Very solid order. There's not much more I can say about it. And then move on to our normal unit grade 3s. 3 copies of Xeno Amagestar Astroea equals Baiko Mask. So grade 3 to our Persona Ride 13k base. Continuous, it can only be written from a grade 3 with Astroea in its card name. Okay, so I was right. It doesn't have to be specifically Amagestar. So if they ever do give us an Astroea new grade 3, we can replace Unica for it, and it will still prog up both Dina and Baiko over here. Anyways, for second skills, active Vanguard once per turn. Remove a card with Astroea and its different card name from this unit from your hand, soul, or drop zone. And if you do, you can choose one of your opponent's rear guards and kill it. And then this unit gets a drive for the turn. All around, it's not horrible. I mean, it's a rear guard kill with triple drive, but like Unica kind of does that better because, you know, Unica could get the triple drive, but on top of that, double critical, so like you're kind of forced to guard it, but fair. And then Auto Vanguard, when she attacks into anything, by Counter Blast 1 and Soul Blasting 3, bind all critical triggers Soul Blaster for this cost, and then choose one of your rear guards and stand, and that and this unit both get plus 5,000 power ton of turn for every 2 critical triggers in your bind zone. All around pretty solid because, not only do you get multi-attack, but guaranteedly she's probably going to be an 18k at the very least. Someone else is going to be a 15k. We combine that with literally any of our grade 2s. They're all at least 20k bases. And I promise you when we get into the later game, basically once you've been playing for at least 2 grade 3 turns, Opera Star is probably somewhere in the 30s off of this, or off of her own skill alone. So, you know, Baiko's all around a very solid grade 3. She gets drive checks, and she does get a rear guard kill for free, which is nice. The only issue that, like, makes her 50-50 is the fact that she eats up CB, in my opinion, because that ends up with putting this deck in a problem, not the Soul Blast 3, because it would be the same cost of Unica at that point. But when it gets rear guard multi-attack on top of that, I guess it's pretty solid, but it's really made a lot better by Sphere giving an extra crit as well. So 3 of Baiko, very solid. And try to time it with Sphere because it just basically makes her free and then gives her the extra crit as well. And then we have last card in the deck, 2 of in the main deck, 1 of in the ride deck of my favorite of the 2, actually. Amagestar Astroea equals Unica. Grade 3 to Persona Ride 13k base, Auto Vanguard Circle. When a trigger unit is Soul Blast for the cause of this unit's ability, choose one of your units, it gets plus 5k for the turn. So it can pick herself, it can pick her booster, it literally picks anything on your board. So, you know, it can proc off Chimera, it can give it to Twin Marvel, while also procking off Twin Marvel and Chimera. It can give it to Capricorn, it can give it to herself. I used to never give it to Vanguard, and then after realizing it could give it to Vanguard, I was like, boost it, always give at least 5k to herself, and then give it to the other rear guards. But if I know the opponent can possibly block this for a 1 to pass, because if you do give it to herself, it's only a 26k, so if they have like the ability to block it for a 1 to pass already, give it to the back row center, so it's at least a 31k, so unless they have a flat 25k shield, or they're on grade 3 and they have a 20k shield, they have to still throw down 2 cards for it. You know, being able to increase numbers for free just by blasting any trigger, regardless if it's a crit, heal, front, draw, etc., is pretty nice. And then Auto Vanguard, when she attacks into a Vanguard, Soul Blast 3 cards and bind all critical triggers Soul Blaster for the cause and perform all the following according to the number of critical triggers in your bind zone, not for the amount of bind that turn. So if you have 1 or more in the bind zone, choose an opponent's rear guard, kill it. If you have 2 or more, get a crit. And if you have 3 or more, she gets a drive. So I'm gonna tell you this right now. If you do hit all 3 of those on your first grade 3 turn and you're the one that went first, your opponent is gonna have one a hell of a time coming back from that. Because I don't know why it does this for me, but like whenever I do this on first grade 3 turn and I'm the one that went first, I tend to pull at least double crits out of my drive check. There was a game where I pulled triple crits out of my drive check one time. So, you know, pretty much this thing is like full-on pressure. Like you get, if your opponent tried to early game rush you or you just went second, you can kill their rear guards. It's an extra crit, so now they're forced to block it or at least give an incentive to, and it has triple drive, making it either it's a PG or you just straight up take it. So like it's all around pretty solid, and like I said, for me at least, under the certain circumstance, I somehow always see double crits with it. So, you know, it's, for me, it's always a PG, this thing. But yeah, so it gives numbers, it does it for free. Like, all of its effect is for free. The only downside is, like, you have to Soul Blast 3, but Dina cuts that straight up in half. Kit's Peak cuts that straight up in half. And granted, no one else does that, but this one kind of combined with either of those two basically makes it free, and this one possibly makes it free as well, and same with Twin Marble. So, like, all around, pretty solid. It's numbers galore. It's crit, drive, rearguard kill. What's like about it? Easy 2 of in the main deck, 1 of in the ride deck. She is very nice to have, and you really only go to Baiko if you really think you need that multi-attack to win. And that's it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. All around, this deck is fun to play. I love playing it. I love the aesthetic with a lot of them having moons in the background. Speaking of which, I always forget to mention Baiko's moon in the background. But, you know, being able to have a ride deck that gets to call itself and has actually really solid rearguard skills, in my opinion, is great. Having a card that literally makes Baiko free and then also just turns her into Unica for the turn is great. We also, don't forget, have, like, a bunch of ways to get our triggers back into Soul in case we guard with them early. We have really good resource management. We have a beat stick that gets bigger as the game goes on. Like, quite literally, this deck has like so much versatility and just does all of its jobs so well, and I love playing it so much. So without further ado, I'm guys one here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, don't forget to follow Twitch. I'll see you all in the next one. Dr. Stand Up, the Vanguards.